It was just another routine patrol on a quiet street when Officer Daniels spotted a scruffy, stray dog lingering near the town square. Its presence irritated him, and the incessant barking that broke the evening calm only added to his annoyance. Without a second thought, he reached for his pepper spray, intent on driving the dog away. But as the mist hit the dog's face, something unexpected occurred. The dog didn't recoil or retaliate. Instead, it darted straight toward a man sitting in a wheelchair nearby. What Daniels learned next shook him to his core, filling him with regret, and changed everything he thought he knew about compassion. The sun hung low, casting a warm golden light over the sleepy town as Officer Daniels leaned against his patrol car, sipping the lukewarm coffee in his hand. It had been a quiet shift, the kind he preferred. But when his gaze drifted toward the park, a skinny, stray dog caught his attention. Its matted fur barely clung to its skeletal frame, ribs visible beneath the patchy coat, and it paced nervously by a bench. Daniels wasn't one for strays. In his eyes, they were nothing more than disturbances, mischief makers who could sometimes pose a risk to the community. This one, in particular, was barking at pedestrians, some of whom quickened their pace to avoid it, while one woman even crossed the street entirely. "That's enough," Daniels muttered under his breath, unhooking his pepper spray from his belt. With slow, deliberate steps, he approached the dog. His boots crunched over the gravel path as the dog looked up, its bark faltering into a hesitant whimper as it took a step back. "Get out of here," Daniels said, his voice firm, though not unkind. He raised the pepper spray and gave it a sharp press. A fine mist shot toward the dog's face. The dog yelped and ran, straight toward a figure sitting in the shadows of a large oak tree. Daniel squinted, watching as the dog bounded to the man, pressing its head into his lap, its tail wagging despite the sting of the spray. The man's eyes locked onto Daniels as he reached down to gently wipe the dog's face with a cloth, whispering soft, calming words. A heavy feeling of unease settled in Daniel's chest as he approached them. The earlier annoyance he'd felt evaporated, replaced by guilt. "Is this your dog?" Daniels called out, his tone now more measured, lacking the harshness from moments before. The man looked up, his eyes cloudy with emotion. "Yes, this is Scout," he said, his voice trembling. "He's not a stray. He's my service dog." Daniels froze, his hand still clenched around the pepper spray. He had just sprayed a service animal, one that helped someone in need. Regret washed over him, making his stomach tighten. "Is he okay?" Daniels asked, softer now. "Can I do anything to help?" The man's response hinted at a story Daniels hadn't prepared for. Kneeling beside the man and Scout, his usual police demeanor faded into a quiet sympathy. He noticed the man's frailty, the worn wheelchair, and the deep sorrow in his eyes. Despite the irritation the spray had caused, Scout remained focused on the man, nudging his hand and whimpering softly. "I'm sorry," Daniels said quietly. "I didn't realize he was a service dog." The man smiled faintly, though his sadness lingered. "Most people don't see past the surface. Scout's not just a dog. He's my lifeline." Daniels felt a tight knot form in his chest. In all his years on the force, he had seen it all: crime, despair, suffering. But this encounter was different. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. "Can I get him some water or help with his eyes?" Daniels offered, now eager to make things right. The man nodded. "There's a fountain over there," he said, gesturing toward a nearby spot. "If you could fill this?" He handed Daniels a small collapsible bowl, attached to the bag on the side of his wheelchair. As Daniels walked to the fountain, he couldn't stop thinking about the bond between Scout and the man. The devotion in the dog's eyes, the quiet dignity of the man. There was more here than met the eye. Who was this man? And what had Scout done for him that was so profound? Returning with the water, Daniels watched as Scout drank eagerly, his tail giving a slight wag despite his discomfort. "Thank you," the man said, gently stroking Scout's head. "He'll be fine. He's tougher than he looks." Daniels crouched down, unable to shake his curiosity. "What's his story? And yours, if you don't mind me asking?" The man hesitated, his gaze fixed on Scout. After a moment, he spoke, his voice a mix of sorrow and quiet strength. "My name's Robert. I was a firefighter for nearly 20 years. My whole life was about saving others. But 5 years ago, a building collapsed during a major fire. I barely made it out. I lost the use of my legs." His voice faltered as he spoke, but he steadied himself with a deep breath. "I thought everything was over. My life, everything I'd worked for, gone in an instant." Daniels listened, his usual skepticism fading, replaced by genuine empathy. "And Scout?" Daniels prompted gently. "Scout came into my life 2 years after the accident," Robert said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "He was a rescue, just like me, abandoned as a pup, left to fend for himself. I met him at a training center. He was scared, skittish around people, but something about him clicked with me. We were both broken in different ways, but together, we started to heal." Robert paused, his hand resting on Scout's back. "He's more than a dog. He's trained to help with daily tasks, fetching things, opening doors. But it's what he's done for my spirit that I'll never be able to repay. He gave me a reason to keep going." Daniel swallowed hard, moved by the depth of Robert's words. He had never thought of the impact a dog like Scout could have on a person's life. "I can see why you care so much about him," Daniel said softly. "And why he's so protective of you." Robert nodded, his eyes far away. "Scout doesn't just protect me physically. He knows when I'm down, when the nightmares come. He saved me more times than I can count, not just from danger, but from myself." Daniels glanced down at Scout, who lay quietly at Robert's feet. The dog's eyes were still irritated, but his demeanor had softened, calm and composed. "I owe you both an apology," Daniels said, the weight of his earlier actions sinking in. "I misjudged the situation. I acted without thinking. Is there anything I can do to make it right?" Robert met his gaze, considering for a moment. "Sometimes the best way to make something right is to learn from it. People see Scout's scars and his rough coat, and they think he's just a stray. But he's a hero, in his own way. If you can remember that, if you can learn to see what others overlook, then that's enough for me." Daniels nodded, his heart heavy with the lessons learned. "I'll remember," he promised, the words more heartfelt than he expected. "And I'll make sure others do, too." As Daniels helped Robert and Scout settle onto a nearby bench, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their story. He stayed close, watching them rest, Scout still alert, but no longer tense. The dog seemed to sense the shift in Daniels, his earlier aggression now replaced with curiosity. A crackle from his radio pulled Daniels away from his thoughts. As he responded, Robert spoke up, his voice calm but resolute. "You're wondering why I'm here, aren't you?" Daniels looked up, caught off guard by the directness of the question. "I guess I am," he admitted. "Most people wouldn't sit here all day." Robert's lips curled into a faint smile. "I'm waiting for someone." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Family?" "No," Robert replied, shaking his head. "Someone I've never met." The cryptic answer piqued Daniel's interest. "Who are you waiting for?" Robert's eyes drifted to the horizon, his face unreadable. "The person who abandoned Scout." Daniels blinked, taken aback. "Wait, You mean you know they're coming here? Robert nodded, his hand resting gently on Scout's head. It's complicated. A few weeks ago, a friend from the shelter where I adopted Scout reached out. They had recently taken in another stray, one that looked strikingly like Scout. Same build, same scars. They dug into the dog's past and found out both of them had been part of an illegal fighting ring. A sick feeling twisted in Daniel's stomach. He had seen cases of animal cruelty before, but the thought of forcing animals to fight each other for entertainment never failed to disgust him. Scout got out, Robert continued. He must have broken free during one of their raids. But the other dog, he didn't make it. When they found him, he was in terrible shape, malnourished, terrified of everything. But he had something Scout didn't, a collar with an address. Daniels leaned in, his interest piqued. And that address brought you here? Robert nodded again. It led to the man who ran the operation. But when the authorities checked, they found the place empty. The guy had fled months ago and no one could trace him. I came here because someone mentioned he might still have ties in the area. I thought if I waited long enough, someone would show up. Someone who knows where he is. Daniel's mind raced as he absorbed the information. So, you're here to confront the person who did this to Scout? Robert's expression hardened, his voice unwavering. I don't expect justice in the way most people think of it, but I need answers. I need to know how Scout ended up in that hellhole and why anyone would think it's okay to treat animals like that. Daniels felt a rush of admiration for Robert's determination. Here was a man who had lost so much, yet was willing to face danger head-on for the sake of his dog. Are you aware this could be dangerous? Daniels asked cautiously. The people who run these kinds of operations don't exactly welcome visitors. Robert gave a small, mirthless laugh. Danger doesn't scare me anymore, officer. I've already faced the worst day of my life. Everything after that is just noise. Scout suddenly let out a low growl, his ears standing alert as he stared toward a figure approaching in the distance. Daniels instinctively placed a hand on his radio, bracing for whatever was coming. The figure was a man, raggedly dressed, moving with a hurried, almost frantic pace. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes darting from Robert to Scout and then to Daniels. What do you want here? The man demanded, his voice rough and filled with wariness. Robert straightened in his wheelchair, his tone calm but firm. I'm looking for answers. You ran with the people who did this to my dog. I want to know why. The man's face twisted in a mixture of fear and defiance. I don't know what you're talking about. Scout's growl deepened, a warning sound that sent a chill through the air. Daniels stepped forward, his badge now clearly visible. You might want to reconsider your next words, he said, his voice steady. Lying to an officer will only make things worse for you. The man hesitated, his gaze flickering nervously to Scout. Fine, he muttered. I used to work for them, okay? But I got out. I didn't want to be part of it anymore. Who's them? Robert pressed. The man glanced around, his eyes darting to the shadows as though he expected someone to jump out at him. He leaned in closer. It's a bigger operation than you think. They don't just run dog fights. They're trafficking animals, smuggling them across state lines. Scout was probably supposed to be sold to some rich fool with more money than sense. Robert's fists clenched at his sides, and even Daniel struggled to mask the fury building inside him. And where are they now? Daniels demanded, his tone growing sharper. The man glanced over his shoulder, his movements jittery. I don't know exactly, but there's a warehouse on the edge of town. They used it as a base before. Maybe they're still there. Daniels exchanged a look with Robert, their shared determination hanging thick in the air between them. You've done the right thing by telling us, Daniels said, his voice cold with authority. "Now get out of here. Don't let me see you again." As the man scurried off, Robert turned to Daniels. "What now?" Daniels tapped his radio, his expression set in stone. "Now, we make sure no other dog has to suffer the way Scout did." As the man's figure disappeared into the distance, a heavy silence settled over Robert and Daniels. Scout, ever vigilant, stayed by Robert's side, his tail swishing in calm recognition of the shift in the air. For Robert, this moment was bittersweet, a mix of hope and trepidation. The address might be a lead, but the reality of confronting it could open a Pandora's box filled with horrors he wasn't ready to face. Daniel stood with his hand resting on his hip, fingers grazing the grip of his holstered weapon. He was no stranger to danger, but the thought of stepping into what could be a full-blown animal trafficking operation gave him pause, even for a seasoned officer. "You don't have to do this alone," Robert said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. Daniels looked at him, surprised by the offer. "You're not exactly in a position to storm a warehouse," he said, gesturing to Robert's wheelchair. "And it's not safe." Robert met his gaze with a knowing look. "I didn't say I'd storm the place. I said, you don't have to do this alone. Scout and I can help in other ways." Daniels sighed, torn between his professional instincts and the undeniable connection growing between them. "All right," he conceded, "but you stay back, and you let me handle the heavy lifting." Robert nodded, grateful for the compromise. "Fair enough." "What's the plan?" Robert asked. Daniels tapped his radio, calling in for backup. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniels. I need a unit to meet me near the old warehouse district on the edge of town. Possible illegal activity. Approach with caution." The response came quickly. "Copy that, Daniels." Unit en route. Scout tilted his head, sensing the shift in the air. Robert ran his hand through the dog's fur, his voice steady. "You ready for this, boy?" Scout let out a soft bark, his eyes glinting with determination. The trio made their way to the warehouse in Daniel's patrol car, the tension in the air mounting with each mile. As they neared the address, the desolation of the area became undeniable. Broken streetlights cast eerie shadows over cracked pavement, and the massive silhouette of the warehouse loomed in the distance as though waiting for them. Daniels parked a safe distance away, turning off the headlights to avoid drawing attention. He glanced over at Robert, who sat quietly beside him, his eyes fixed on the warehouse. "If things go sideways, you stay put," Daniels said, his voice firm. Robert smirked, his confidence unwavering. "I'm not reckless, officer." The backup unit arrived soon after, and Daniels briefed his fellow officers on the situation. They decided to approach cautiously, splitting into two groups to cover the perimeter. "Scout stays with me," Robert said, as Daniels handed him a police radio. "He can pick up on things we might miss." Daniels hesitated, but finally nodded. "Fine, but keep him close." As the officers moved toward the warehouse, Scout's ears perked up and his nose twitched. He tugged gently at Robert's wheelchair, guiding him toward a side entrance that had previously gone unnoticed. "Looks like he found something," Robert whispered into the radio. Daniels turned toward them, brow furrowed. "What is it?" Robert pointed to the entrance, a rusted metal door, slightly ajar. "Scout seems to think there's something in there." Daniels motioned for one of the officers to join him as he approached the door. He eased it open slowly, the squeak of the hinges breaking the stillness of the night. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and something else, something acrid, metallic. Scout let out a low growl, his body coiled in tension. Robert tightened his grip on the leash, whispering to Scout, "Easy, boy," as they moved further into the dark warehouse. The flashlight beam swept across rows of cages stacked against the walls, most of them empty, but some still holding frightened animals. Dogs, cats, even exotic birds, wide eyes reflecting the light. Daniel's partner radioed in the Discovery, requesting animal control and additional units to handle the situation. As they ventured deeper into the warehouse, muffled voices echoed from an adjacent room. Daniel signaled for silence, motioning for the team to spread out and approach the door cautiously. Inside, two voices were arguing about moving the rest of the stock that night, confirming they were in the midst of a criminal operation. The officers burst into the room, weapons drawn, and ordered the men inside to raise their hands. One of the criminals bolted toward the back exit, but he was quickly intercepted by Scout, who lunged forward, barking loudly, his teeth bared. The sight of the dog stopped the man dead in his tracks. "Back off," Daniels ordered. Scout immediately complied, his body tense but no longer aggressive. The officers swiftly apprehended the suspects, and Daniels turned to Robert, his face a mix of gratitude and respect. "Your dog's got instincts," he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Robert smiled, pride shining in his eyes. He knows when something's wrong. As the suspects were led away and the freed animals began to be tended to, Daniels paused, a thought weighing on him. Robert, on the other hand, had already made up his mind. This operation had changed him, and he couldn't just walk away. "What now?" he asked, concern for the animal's future clear in his voice. Daniels leaned against a rusted beam, sighing. "Animal control is on the way, but it's not always a happy ending for all of them. Not all shelters have the resources to handle cases like this." Robert's face darkened as he thought about what would happen to the animals. "That's not right," he murmured. "After everything they've been through, they deserve a chance at real homes." Daniels nodded, understanding the pain in Robert's words. "We saved them from one nightmare only to send them into another." Robert's gaze turned to Scout, and an idea sparked inside him. What if we could do more? His voice was firm with newfound resolve. Daniels raised an eyebrow, curious. "What do you mean?" Robert's eyes softened as he looked at Scout. "What if we created a rehabilitation program? A sanctuary that doesn't just house these animals but gives them a purpose? People who need them as much as they need a second chance. Veterans, seniors, kids in need of emotional support." Daniels crossed his arms, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "That's an ambitious idea." Robert nodded, his voice resolute. "It's more than an idea. It's a solution. These animals don't just need saving. They need healing. And people like me, we need them too." Before Daniels could respond, the sound of gravel crunching under tires interrupted the moment. A black SUV pulled up, and Monica, an officer from Animal Welfare, stepped out. "I've been briefed," she said, walking over to them. "We'll take it from here." Monica knelt to pet Scout before turning back to Robert. "We'll make sure these animals get medical attention and shelter, but we're stretched thin. This many rescues will overwhelm our system." Robert's jaw tightened. "Let me help. I have some land outside town, a few unused buildings. If I can turn them into a temporary sanctuary, can we work together?" Monica hesitated, clearly intrigued but cautious. "That's a generous offer, but it's a lot of responsibility. These animals need proper care, funding, volunteers." Robert's resolve was unwavering. "I owe Scout my life. This is the least I can do." Daniel, standing nearby, admired Robert's determination. "You might have more support than you think," he said. "I know a few people who'd be willing to help out, and I've got some free time when I'm not on shift." Monica smiled faintly. "All right, if you're serious, I'll arrange for the first batch of animals to be transferred tomorrow. but you'll need to prove this is more than just a nice idea." Robert's voice was steady. "It's a promise." The next morning, the work began. Robert studied a crude blueprint he'd sketched for the sanctuary while Scout lay by his side. Monica arrived with the first transport van, carrying 6 dogs in varying states of neglect, matted fur, visible ribs, and wary eyes. She handed Robert a clipboard. "This is what we've got for now. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Robert nodded, unshaken. As the dogs were unloaded, one in particular, a trembling, scrappy terrier, caught Scout's attention. The terrier growled faintly, but Scout, calm and non-threatening, approached the dog, tilting his head. The terrier's growl softened, and the two animals communicated silently. Robert watched the interaction, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. "Looks like you've got a helper already," Monica remarked, amusement in her voice. Robert smiled softly as he watched Scout lie down next to the terrier, inching closer without threatening. "I think they understand each other," he said quietly. As they continued working on the property, Daniels arrived with a toolbox and a bag of dog food. "Figured you might need some help," he said, handing Robert the kibble. Robert smirked. "You don't strike me as the handyman type," Daniels chuckled. "Let's just say I know how to follow instructions." The barn began to take shape, with Monica guiding Robert and Daniels on how to set up the kennels and provide the dogs with secure, safe spaces. But as the day wore on, Robert could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Supplies were running low, and the barn was far from the ideal shelter he had envisioned. By late afternoon, Robert sat on a bale of hay, his head in his hands, while Scout lay beside him, sensing his distress. Monica approached, her voice gentle. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed. Most people wouldn't even attempt what you're doing." Robert looked up, exhaustion etched on his face, but his determination was unwavering. "These animals don't have anyone else. If I give up, what happens to them?" Monica hesitated before sitting beside him. "You can't save every dog, Robert, but for the ones you do save, it means everything." Just then, a commotion near the barn door caught their attention. One of the dogs had managed to slip out of its enclosure and was darting around the property. Scout sprang into action, barking softly as he herded the dog back toward the barn. Watching Scout's smooth, purposeful movements, Robert felt a surge of gratitude. "That dog is braver than I am," he muttered under his breath. Daniels, overhearing, smirked. "He's got your stubbornness, that's for sure." As the sun set, the first day at the sanctuary ended in exhaustion, but also a sense of accomplishment. The barn, still very much a work in progress, now housed the rescued dogs in clean, safe spaces. Scout patrolled the area, as if assuming the role of caretaker. That night, Robert sat by a fire pit outside his home, joined by Monica and Daniels. The air was cool and the flames crackled, offering a moment of solace. "You've started something good here," Daniels said, his tone sincere. "But you're going to need more than good intentions to keep it going." Monica nodded in agreement. "There are grants for animal rescue operations, and I can connect you with local vets who might offer discounted services. But this can't just be a solo mission. You'll need a team." Robert stared into the flames, his mind racing with possibilities. "I'll do whatever it takes. These animals deserve a fighting chance." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "Even if it means asking for help?" Robert chuckled, his confidence returning. "Especially then." Monica smiled. "Good, because you're going to need all the help you can get." The next morning, Robert was up before sunrise, double-checking the makeshift kennels and refilling water bowls. Scout stayed close, moving with purpose, always by his side. But as the day wore on, a sense of unease began to creep over Robert. Monica had warned him that not everyone in the area supported rescue efforts. Some viewed stray dogs as a nuisance, and if enough complaints surfaced, the county could shut everything down. But Robert pushed the thought aside. He had no time for doubters. Later that morning, Monica arrived with another load of supplies. "I got a call from someone at the city shelter," she said, her face tight with concern. "There's talk in town about what you're doing here. A few people aren't happy." Robert frowned, flipping through the paperwork. "What's their problem? It's not like these dogs are bothering anyone." Monica lowered her voice, glancing around cautiously. "There's a group of locals who've been complaining about strays for years. They don't want a rescue operation in their backyard. And if they make enough noise, the county could shut this whole thing down." Robert's teeth clenched. He knew this wouldn't be an easy fight, but he was ready for it. The next challenge came when Robert received a newspaper with a headline that made his stomach drop. "Local man's dog shelter sparks controversy." The article detailed the rescue effort, but it focused heavily on the concerns of nearby residents, complaints about noise, disease, and the potential for property devaluation. Some anonymous sources were particularly harsh. Monica, seeing Robert's frustration, suggested they fight back with the truth. "Let me handle the media," she said. "We'll turn this around." Robert nodded, his resolve returning. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about these dogs and proving they deserve better." Days passed, and the resistance grew, but Robert remained steadfast. Monica's media campaign brought in reporters, and Robert shared his story, recounting how Scout had come into his life and saved him. As Robert spoke, the camera crew captured every word, focusing not just on Scout, but on the man who had given him a second chance. Meanwhile, Monica introduced the reporters to the other animals, each with their own heartbreaking story, a testament to resilience and the importance of second chances. The media coverage began to gain traction, and public opinion started to shift. Positive comments flooded social media, with many locals expressing support for the shelter. Donations trickled in, small amounts at first, but enough to make a difference. Encouraged by the response, Monica and Robert organized an open house event to welcome the community and showcase their work. The day of the open house, the shelter buzzed with activity. Volunteers set up tables with informational pamphlets, adoption forms, and merchandise to raise funds. Scout stood proudly by the entrance, wearing a bandana that read, "Adopt, don't shop." To Robert's surprise, familiar faces began to appear among the crowd. Daniels arrived with his wife and children, who immediately gravitated toward the dogs. "This place looks great," Daniels said, clapping Robert on the shoulder. "You've come a long way." Monica's efforts to reach out to skeptics also bore fruit. Among the attendees were a few of the neighbors who had initially voiced concerns. One woman, Mrs. Carter, approached Robert hesitantly. "I wasn't sure about all this at first," she admitted, glancing around at the bustling barn. "But seeing it in person, it's impressive." Robert offered a small smile. "It's not just about the dogs. It's about proving they're worth the effort." Mrs. Carter nodded, her expression softening. "I think you're doing something good here. Let me know if you need help." The event was a success, with several dogs finding new homes and enough donations raised to cover immediate expenses. As the last of the visitors trickled out, Robert felt a glimmer of hope that the tide was turning. That evening, as Robert cleaned up, he noticed Scout sitting by the barn door, staring out into the distance. Curious, he walked over and followed the dog's gaze. In the fading light, he saw the figure of a young boy standing near the fence. the same boy who had defaced it days earlier. The boy froze when he saw Robert approach, clearly debating whether to run. Instead, Robert stopped a few feet away and spoke calmly. "You've been here before." The boy fidgeted but didn't respond. Robert crouched down, making himself less intimidating. "You know, everyone deserves a chance to make things right. That includes you." The boy looked up, his face a mixture of guilt and defiance. "I didn't mean anything by it. My dad says dogs like these are dangerous." Robert nodded slowly. "I've heard people say that. But have you ever spent time with a dog like Scout?" The boy shook his head. "Then maybe it's time you did," Robert said, gesturing for Scout to come over. The dog approached cautiously, sensing the boy's nervousness. "Scout's been through a lot, but he's one of the gentlest dogs you'll ever meet. Go ahead, give him a pat." Hesitantly, the boy extended his hand. Scout sniffed it, then leaned in, wagging his tail. A small smile broke across the boy's face as he stroked the dog's fur. "See?" Robert said. "Not so dangerous after all." The boy nodded, his defenses lowering. "I guess not." As the boy walked away, Robert felt a surge of hope. It wasn't just about changing minds. It was about building bridges, one interaction at a time. A few weeks after the open house, the shelter's momentum was building, but so were its challenges. The shelter received a steady influx of dogs, each with their own heartbreaking story. While Monica worked tirelessly to handle the growing public interest and manage volunteers, Robert struggled to keep up with the day-to-day care of the animals. One particularly busy morning, Robert found Scout sitting by the barn door again, his ears perked. This time, Scout was growling softly, his focus fixed on something in the distance. Following his gaze, Robert spotted two men standing near the fence. They weren't locals. He could tell by their demeanor and the unmarked truck parked nearby. Robert's gut twisted with unease. He approached cautiously, Scout at his side. "Can I help you?" Robert called out. One of the men, tall with a rough demeanor, smirked. "Heard you've got a lot of dogs here. Thought we'd check it out." "This is private property," Robert replied firmly. "If you're interested in adopting, you'll need to come back during open hours." The shorter man chuckled, leaning casually against the fence. "We're not here for that. You see, some folks think this shelter's more trouble than it's worth. Noisy dogs, dirty animals. You get the picture." Robert's jaw tightened. "We're following all regulations. If you've got a problem, take it up with the authorities." "Oh, we will," the tall man sneered. "But until then, maybe think about how long you can keep this place running with so much opposition." Scout growled louder, his stance protective. The men exchanged glances and backed away, but not before the shorter one added, "Careful who you trust, Trent. Not everyone's rooting for you." As the truck rumbled away, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a random visit. He suspected these men were hired by someone who wanted the shelter shut down, perhaps a disgruntled neighbor or someone unhappy with the shelter's growing visibility. Later that day, Monica burst into the barn holding her phone. "Robert, you're not going to believe this," she said. She handed him the phone, which displayed a social media post accusing the shelter of neglect and poor conditions. The post featured photos of sickly dogs in dirty kennels, photos that Robert immediately recognized as fake. "Who posted this?" Robert asked, his voice sharp. "An anonymous account," Monica replied. "But it's spreading fast. People are commenting, sharing. It's bad." Robert felt a wave of anger and frustration. The timing was too perfect. It had to be connected to the men he'd seen earlier. "We can't let this go unanswered," Monica said. "I've already reached out to our supporters, asking them to post positive reviews and photos. But we need something bigger to counteract this, Robert said, thinking for a moment. What about a live stream? We'll show people exactly what the shelter looks like in real time. The next morning, Monica set up a camera in the barn, broadcasting live to the shelter's social media page. Robert stood in front of the camera, flanked by Scout and a few other dogs. "Good morning, everyone," Robert began, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "I'm Robert Trent, and this is my shelter. Recently, some false accusations have been made against us, claiming we don't care for our animals properly. I want to show you the truth." The camera panned across the barn, capturing the clean kennels, the fresh food and water, and the happy, healthy dogs wagging their tails. Monica narrated in the background, pointing out the improvements they'd made with the donations they'd received. As the live stream continued, comments flooded in. Supporters voiced their encouragement, while skeptics admitted the shelter looked far better than the misleading photos had suggested. The video gained traction, reaching thousands of viewers within hours. By the end of the day, the shelter's reputation was not only restored, but bolstered. Donations increased, and more volunteers signed up to help. However, Robert knew this wasn't the end of their challenges. That evening, as Robert locked up the barn, he found Scout pacing near the back door, whining softly. Following the dog, Robert discovered a small crumpled note wedged under the doorframe. He unfolded it and read the hastily scrawled words, "Leave while you still can. Next time, it won't just be words." Robert's grip tightened on the paper as he looked down at Scout. "They're trying to scare us, boy," he muttered, "but they don't know who they're dealing with." Scout barked softly, as if in agreement. The note Robert found weighed heavily on his mind as he prepared for another day at the shelter. He couldn't ignore the threat, but he also couldn't let fear dictate his actions. Instead, he channeled his unease into action. It was time to confront whoever was behind the campaign against the shelter. Monica, always one step ahead, suggested a proactive approach. "We need to get ahead of this," she said, placing a stack of flyers on the table. "Let's host a community event, a dog adoption fair. We'll invite local businesses, law enforcement, and media. The more people see the good work we're doing, the harder it'll be for anyone to spread lies." Robert hesitated. "Do you think it's safe? Whoever left that note might try something." "We'll take precautions," Monica replied firmly. "And besides, letting them scare us into hiding isn't an option." As preparations for the event ramped up, tensions continued to simmer. The shelter received more anonymous threats, and Robert noticed unfamiliar cars idling near the property at odd hours. Despite this, support for the shelter grew. Local businesses donated supplies, and volunteers worked tirelessly to prepare the barn for the fair. The day of the event dawned sunny and warm. Brightly colored banners lined the driveway, and rows of tables showcased adoption forms, merchandise, and information about the shelter. Monica had even arranged for a food truck and a pet grooming station, adding to the festive atmosphere. Scout, wearing a fresh bandana, sat proudly near the entrance. As visitors began to arrive, children flocked to him, and he responded with gentle tail wags and soft nudges. Robert scanned the crowd, his eyes landing on a group of uniformed officers who had stopped by. One of them, Officer Daniels, approached with a nod. "Looks like you've got a good turnout," he said. "Thanks for coming," Robert said, shaking his hand. "I wasn't sure how this would go." Daniels gave a small smile. "You've got a lot of support in this town, Trent. Don't let a few bad apples ruin that." That evening, after the event concluded, Robert and Monica sat in the barn, surrounded by sleeping dogs and the remnants of a successful day. Scout lay at Robert's feet, his presence a comforting reminder of why they were fighting so hard. "We need to find out who's behind this," Robert said, his voice low. "That man didn't just show up on his own." Monica nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Let's start with the license plate. Daniels might be able to help." The next day, Robert met with Officer Daniels and shared the plate number. Daniels promised to look into it discreetly, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. A few days later, Daniels called with an update. "You were right to be suspicious," he said. "The car's registered to a private security firm. And guess who hired them? One of your neighbors, Mr. Carter." Robert's jaw tightened. Mr. Carter had been one of the most vocal opponents of the shelter since its inception. "What's his motive?" Robert asked. "Hard to say," Daniels replied, "but I'd bet it has something to do with property values. People like him only see numbers, not lives." Robert thanked Daniels and hung up, his resolve hardening. It was time to confront Mr. Carter. That evening, Robert stood at Mr. Carter's front door, Scout by his side. When Carter opened the door, his expression shifted from surprise to discomfort. "Robert, what brings you here?" "I know you've been trying to shut us down," Robert said bluntly. "Hiring people to intimidate us, spreading lies. It stops now." Carter stiffened. "You can't prove anything." Robert held his ground. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you that no matter what you do, the shelter isn't going anywhere. We've got the community support, and we're doing good work. You can either get on board or keep wasting your energy fighting us." Carter said nothing, but the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes told Robert his words had landed. As Robert walked away, Scout trotting beside him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were up against powerful forces, but with determination and community support, he knew they could weather the storm. The confrontation with Mr. Carter weighed on Robert's mind as he returned to the shelter. He knew Carter wasn't acting alone, and the man's silence only confirmed his suspicion. But Robert also knew that the shelter was stronger than ever, thanks to the day's community support at the adoption fair. A week later, Robert was in the barn tending to a new group of rescues when Monica burst in, holding a stack of papers. "You need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. She handed him a flyer with bold, inflammatory accusations against the shelter printed across the top. The flyer had been anonymously distributed to mailboxes all over town. Unsafe conditions, exploitation of animals, and fraud. Robert read aloud, his stomach sinking. "They're doubling down." Monica nodded. "And there's more. Carter's group is organizing a town meeting next week to call for the shelter's closure." Robert sighed and leaned against the stall door. "We need a plan, Monica. We can't let them win." Monica placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's fight back, with the truth." The week leading up to the meeting was a whirlwind of preparation. Monica gathered evidence of the shelter's impact, records of successful adoptions, testimonials from families, and a detailed breakdown of the shelter's finances to counter the accusations of fraud. They also reached out to local media outlets, inviting them to cover the meeting. On the day of the meeting, Robert arrived at the town hall early. The room quickly filled with people, many holding signs in support of the shelter, while a smaller but vocal group stood near the back, led by Mr. Carter. Scout sat quietly by Robert's side, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. The meeting began with Carter taking the floor. He presented a slideshow filled with distorted images and misleading statistics, painting the shelter as a blight on the community. As he spoke, murmurs rippled through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads in disbelief. When Carter finished, the moderator called Robert to the podium. He stood, his heart pounding, But as he looked out at the crowd, he saw familiar faces. Families who had adopted from the shelter, volunteers who had spent countless hours caring for the animals, and even Officer Daniels, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. Robert took a deep breath. "Good evening," he began, his voice steady. "I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here to defend the truth." He started by addressing the financial accusations, displaying spreadsheets and receipts that showed every dollar donated had been used to benefit the animals. He shared photos of happy, healthy dogs in their new homes, and played a video montage of families sharing how their lives had been transformed by their adoptions. "But this isn't just about numbers," Robert continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about community. It's about giving animals like Scout a second chance and bringing people together." He gestured toward Scout, who wagged his tail and stood, earning a round of applause from the audience. Scout was once a stray, written off by society, but now he's a therapy dog helping kids in schools and hospitals. That's what we do here. We see potential where others see problems. As Robert spoke, the energy in the room shifted. People who had been on the fence began nodding, their skepticism melting away. Even some of Carter's supporters lowered their signs, their expressions softening. When Robert finished, the room erupted in applause. But before he could step down, a young girl in the front row raised her hand. "Can I say something?" she asked. The moderator nodded, and the girl stood, clutching a framed photo. "This is Lucy," she said, holding up the picture of a golden retriever. "We adopted her from the shelter last year. She's my best friend, and she helped me when I was scared to go to school. Without the shelter, I wouldn't have her." Tears filled Robert's eyes as more people stood to share their stories. A single mother spoke about how a rescued dog had helped her autistic son communicate for the first time. An elderly man shared how his adopted dog had brought him companionship after his wife passed away. Carter, visibly uncomfortable, tried to interject, but the crowd wasn't having it. "We've heard enough from you," someone shouted, and others murmured in agreement. The moderator eventually called for a vote on whether the shelter should remain open. Hands shot up across the room in overwhelming support. Carter's group, outnumbered and silenced, left in defeat. As the crowd dispersed, Robert and Monica stayed behind to gather their materials. Officer Daniels approached with a smile. "You did it, Robert. You showed them the truth." Robert looked down at Scout, who nudged his hand with a soft bark. "We all did it. This wasn't just me." The shelter not only remained open, but thrived. Donations poured in, and new volunteers signed up to help. The events of the meeting became a turning point, not just for the shelter, but for the entire community. A few weeks later, Robert stood in the barn, watching Scout play with a group of newly adopted dogs. "You did good, buddy," he said, patting Scout's head. "We all did." Scout wagged his tail as if to say he agreed. The warmth of the sun filtered through the barn windows as Robert stood with Scout by his side, reflecting on how far they had come. The shelter, once the target of baseless accusations, was now thriving, its reputation stronger than ever. The battle they had fought wasn't just for the animals, it was for the heart of the community. A fight to prove that compassion and truth could overcome prejudice and greed. In the weeks following the town meeting, the shelter saw an outpouring of support. Donations arrived from across the region, many accompanied by heartfelt letters from people inspired by the story of Scout and the shelter's resilience. Families who had adopted from the shelter volunteered their time, helping with everything from cleaning kennels to organizing adoption events. The local press ran follow-up stories highlighting the shelter's impact, cementing its place as a cherished part of the community. Robert noticed a change in the people around him. Neighbors who had once ignored the shelter now stopped by with supplies or just to visit the animals. Even Officer Daniels, who had once sprayed Scout with pepper spray, became a regular visitor, often bringing his son to play with the dogs. One afternoon, Monica approached Robert with a folder in hand. "You're going to want to see this," she said, her face glowing with excitement. Inside was a proposal from a local business consortium offering to fund the expansion of the shelter. They wanted to build a new wing dedicated to training therapy dogs, inspired by Scout's story. Robert smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "This is incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Looks like you're going to have some company," he said to Scout. The shelter's transformation extended beyond its physical space. Robert and Monica organized community outreach programs, teaching children about animal care and the importance of kindness. Scout became the face of these programs, visiting schools and hospitals, spreading joy wherever he went. His story served as a powerful reminder of the impact one animal could have, not just on a single person, but on an entire community. One day during an adoption event at the park, a young boy approached Scout with a hesitant smile. "Is he the dog from the story?" he asked, looking up at Robert. "He sure is," Robert replied, kneeling beside Scout, "and he'd love to meet you." The boy knelt down and Scout gently nudged his hand, earning a giggle. "I want to help dogs like him someday," the boy said, his voice filled with determination. Robert's heart swelled. "You can. Kindness and courage can change the world, one paw at a time." As the sun set over the shelter that evening, Robert stood by the barn, watching the animals play in the yard. Monica joined him, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "We've come a long way," she said, her voice filled with pride. "We have," Robert agreed, his eyes on Scout, who was now playing with a group of puppies. "It's amazing what can happen when people come together for a good cause." The shelter became a beacon of hope, its story spreading far beyond the town. But for Robert, the real victory was seeing the joy in the faces of the animals and the people whose lives they touched. It was in the wagging tails of the dogs who found their forever homes, in the laughter of children playing with their new furry friends, and in the quiet moments of connection that reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. As Robert locked up the barn for the night, Scout trotted over, his tail wagging. Robert knelt down, rubbing the dog's ears. "We did good, didn't we, buddy?" Scout licked his face in response, his eyes full of loyalty and love. Robert stood, looking out at the stars. "We'll keep going," he said softly, "for every animal that needs a second chance, and for every person who needs to learn what love and kindness can do." If this story moved you, consider how you can make a difference in the lives of animals, whether it's adopting, volunteering, or simply spreading the word. Every action counts. Share this story with someone who loves animals as much as you do, and help us continue the mission of kindness and second chances. And if you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe our channel